for Schools programs. We're here today and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for this workshop where we're going to learn some really cool stuff about math in the food forest. So I know typically in our program, for those of you that have been in the program for a while, we've always focused on science. But Debbie and I met Scott Morrison, which I'm going to introduce in a second. He just kind of presented us with this different idea, an alternative idea about, why not do math, because we all know about how focused testing is on math and language. Just realized why not do a workshop and make it easier to incorporate that outdoor activity and include math. And we're very fortunate. So just to introduce you, we have here a guest of honor. He's an expert actually at doing this and training teachers on how to do these fun outdoor activities. So welcome, Scott Morrison. He's an associate professor of education. So just so you know, we only go out there and get the top presenters for you guys to provide you with the best information. So Scott, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started with the presentation?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. When we met, I envisioned being in Miami doing this work with you. So I hope we can still do that at some point after the pandemic. Yeah, I was a sixth grade teacher, an elementary education major in college. I love working with kids. When I was asked to teach science, I said, okay, I'm going to garden with my kids. So I built a school garden from scratch with my students. And then as I started using it more and more, started seeing I could do other things in it. So like when I was talking to, is it Elena earlier? She was all like, yeah, we're doing literacy, we're doing art. Like you start to get a vision for other subject areas you can use in the garden. And that's been kind of what I've been doing as a teacher educator when I transitioned out of the classroom. How can I get students who are going to be teachers to start being comfortable getting kids outside the classroom? And how can they start seeing curriculum everywhere? And so they can do engaging, hands-on learning experiences for their students that help meet standards and make sure kids are equipped to, do the things they need to do to be successful at school. So I love it. I love being outside. I love gardens. I love food. I think I'll close with this and then let you say something else, or Eddie or Debbie, if you want. I found that when I took kids outside, they loved it and they loved coming to class more. And then when they come to class more, they're more motivated and engaged. And then they're more willing to do some of the harder work that you asked them to do. So it was this nice feedback loop of using the outside, using nature, using gardens to kind of really hook them in to everything we needed to do throughout the year.
Yes, thank you so much, Scott, for that. And we promise to get you to Miami at some point.
Yes.
That'd be great, actually. And yeah, hopefully, we can all start meeting in person soon for our workshops like we used to. And, it was a lot of fun to all be in person together and do those activities actually in the food forest. But, we do what we can. So just a quick reminder to everybody, if you haven't gone out already to get your 17 sticks. I actually had misunderstood. I had 7, so I just started breaking mine into smaller pieces until I got 17. Scott, you mentioned they were supposed to be longer than your pinky, but not longer than your arm, right, from the elbow to your pinky. So, right, so don't go out there and hurt your back trying to lift a big tree branch or anything.
I actually have a bag next to me of all kinds of sticks that I keep in my car with me in case, I never need to do an impromptu workshop somewhere. I got material. So I got probably 75 sticks in a bag. And I also probably have about 25 pine cones because really there's nothing magic about the sticks. Where we are in North Carolina, there's just kind of sticks everywhere outside if there's trees. Where I teach, there's a lot of pine cones too. So any manipulative is good.
Yep. So take note of that. That's actually a great tip. you know, what I love about this project already, even before we start, is the simplicity of the materials. Um, Anybody can find that. So, and it can work with, you know, rocks and as you said, any manipulative that you'll find, leaves, rocks that can be counted. So I don't know exactly what the activity is. It's a surprise for Debbie and I as well. But Scott, we're definitely ready to get started. If I think well, just a little bit of housekeeping first. We didn't discuss this. I'm not sure, Scott, if you want everybody just chiming in if they have a question, or are we going to wait until the end of the presentation for question and answer session?
I can go as formal or informal as you want. I normally teach outside. We would normally be standing in a circle. We'd be going around to hear from everybody, and you can ask a question at any time. I have a couple prompts to, I have some slides I'm gonna use to structure everything, and there's a couple prompts to get you to use the chat if you're able and feel comfortable. But if you wanna unmute at any point and chime in, you certainly can.
Yep, and Debbie and I will be monitoring the chat as best we can. So I'll be taking down some questions. If you want to just type it in the chat, I'll go ahead and make a note of it. And then at the end of the presentation, we can also bring up some of those questions. You know, if it is something that you wanted to hold off to the end, just type it in the chat. So if not, just I guess, you know, hold up your stick or just chime in, go ahead and jump in with your question, and you know, we'll go from there. So Debbie, are you gonna share the screen, or are we gonna?
Nope.
Scott?
Scott's got it.
Yeah, everybody see that? Okay.
Okay, so
Yeah, we're good. We see it.
All right. Eddie, Debbie, anything else, logistics before we get started?
Nope, I think we're ready to go, and anything else, we'll figure it out as we go.
Okay, awesome. Well, again, thank you all for inviting me. I'm thrilled to talk about math and the food forest. I still remember when I met Eddie and Debbie in Madison, Wisconsin, and I heard them talking about some of the work that they do, and I was fascinated by it. And I remember giving you the pitch about doing math outside, that sometimes science is the go-to. I know it's what got me outside gardening. And when I started getting into math, and especially with a colleague of mine who does math education at Elon University, we just started getting more and more into all the math we can do in outside spaces and in gardens and in forests, and in your case, food forests in particular. So really, really thrilled to share this with you. Normally, I do about a 6-hour version of this, and that's not enough. So I'm just gonna give you a little taste, and maybe we can do another session later, or maybe we do stuff in person when I come down to Miami a little bit later. But I do, if some of you introduced yourselves and said a few things before we got started, it would really be nice if you could, you know, give me a little more info in the chat box, just so I can get a sense of kind of who I'm talking to here, name, kind of grade level you work with, and your favorite subject or unit or topic. Like what gets you excited about teaching? That would be really helpful. And if you have time, I have a link to a Google form. I think Eddie might have put it in the chat already. That would be great if I could, you know, quick 4 questions from you. That would be really helpful.
No, I didn't share that one yet in the chat, but we will now.
Excellent.
All right, putting it in now.
All right. So thank you for settling in and typing in the chat box if you can. Okay, thanks, Elena. Second and third grade, virtual right now. Where food comes from. Lead garden teacher. So something I created at Elon University is a course called Garden-Based Learning. And I partner with 2 schools and I work with their lead garden teachers. And we do after-school garden clubs. And my students come and work with their students to maintain their garden. And we're always doing different activities in the garden with kids. All right, Nancy, middle grades, 6 to 8. Excellent. Agricultural education, that's really good. All right, and yeah, and I remember you saying you're developing that new program. I'm so fascinated by what you're doing. That's just amazing. Sounds exciting. Yeah, food forest on school land, that's really good. Just another minute or so if you have time. I found that that Google form, I've been teaching in person and somewhat virtually since August as well. And Google Forms are a good way to check in, especially that first question, like, how are you doing, is a really good one. If you're doing really well, I want to know, and I want to celebrate that with you. If you're not doing well, I kind of need to know that too. That would be really good information. So I don't know how often you all are using Google Forms these days or other kind of polls to check in with students, but I think the social emotional aspect of the work that you're doing right now is really, really important. It's important to feel connected. All right, thanks, Megan. Kindergarten and 6th, and you do ESOL. Okay. Oh, project-based learning. Oh yeah. Okay, project-based learning is like one of my jams too. I'm married to a 1st grade teacher who works at a project-based school. We can talk projects all day long, and she uses gardens to do it. She should be the one. Eddie, you got the wrong guy. I'm married to the person who does work with 1st graders. All right, Hal, thanks. 4th grade, math, science, social studies. Oh, another lead garden teacher. I still like teaching. Mike, excellent. So Mike, you work with exceptional children. That's good. In fact, I just got off a call earlier, right before this, with some people in the UK who do some work with kids with autism in forests.
Cool.
And it's, yeah. So do you take your students outside?
Yes. We have quite a garden. Banana circles, gardens, papayas, sugarcane, a lot of stuff.
That's excellent. Good. Oh, thanks for clarifying, Megan. You're not kindergarten and 6th. That's quite a range. That you're all of them. That's good.
Yeah, I'm
all
kindergarten through 4th as well. This year because we're online, so I've got quite a wide range this year. Normally, I generally have 4th and 5th graders.
Okay. Another reason we're all flexible. You never know what the pandemic's going to bring. Well, thanks for filling out the Google form. The several of you that have filled it out already are doing well today. You're on the 4 and 5 range, so I'm very impressed. And there's a range of how often you all go outside. And yeah, I appreciate you filling that out. Well, let's keep going. That's enough time there. I want to say I'm really impressed with what the Education Fund does. Right after I met Debbie and Eddie, I followed them on Instagram and have been kind of just, doing what we do on social media. We kind of find out about each other, even if we're not directly communicating. And it's just really cool work that the Education Fund does. So I just want to give you a shout out and say thank you. I think it makes a difference for teachers. It makes a difference for kids. It makes a difference for the community. And I think that's what schools should be. Schools should be more than just places where kids learn to take tests. And you all are pushing against that. In fact, you're probably making better test takers because of the dynamic environments you're creating for kids. I saw this on your Twitter feed. So on the left is a tweet from the Education Fund. And on the right is my student, Abby, working in an after-school garden club that I help facilitate. And she is a senior and she's going to be, she's student teaching right now. She's going to be a teacher next year. And so there's something very similar about these 2 images. I don't know if you notice, but there's something I want to mention first. And that's when I work with predominantly white students at a predominantly white institution, and we go into schools in which the students are predominantly Black or Hispanic or Latinx, we have to talk about the dynamics of who's predominant in the school. What are their thoughts on agriculture and gardens? There's a history in the United States of agriculture being a place where people were forced to work. And so what does it mean when students go back outside? And some perceive that as negative, but then others see it as an engaged way of learning. And so I talk about that with my students who are mostly future teachers. And I wanted to point you to this article called Liberated Roots, in which Jay says gardens are really good spaces. You need to make sure you're attentive to cultural aspects that can make the work better than you would otherwise. So there's a link there, and I on the slide in the top right corner is a bit.ly link. You all have access to these slides and you'll have access to the links. And I wanted to point out, and I think one of you is in Portland right now, Megan maybe, and there's a great organization there called Growing Gardens, and they have some specific language around making sure that what they do with school gardens is part of some anti-racist work, some unlearning racism and internalized oppression as a part of what they do with gardens. So I just want to bring that up to say gardens are not neutral spaces. They are political spaces, and they carry social and cultural weight with them. I'd love to talk about this more with you. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat, or maybe that's another session, but I just want to acknowledge that from the beginning. All right, so here's what we're going to do. Since we're on Zoom, normally we'd be outside, we'd be in a circle. I'm going to go through pretty quickly a few slides and explain a little bit about the pictures that you're going to see. And I want you to do some noticing while I'm showing you the pictures, okay? So that could be something that's common or known or expected, something that you've seen before. Maybe it resonates with you because you do something similar. Maybe it's different or unusual. I know the middle of North Carolina is different from Miami, which is different from Chicago, which is different from Portland. So what's different or new? And something you're not sure about. Wait, I don't know what that means. What is, that's unsettling to me, or that's confusing. Or maybe you notice some concepts or patterns of themes across all the images I'm going to show you. All right. Yeah, and I'm going to pause and recognize Megan's comment about the focus on native plants. I've noticed that too in what they're doing. That's really important that you're attending to the native ecosystem, the eco region that you're in. Good work there. We don't have banana trees in our school gardens, that's for sure. All right, here we go. So I wanted to give you a visual of some of the gardens I've helped build in local schools in Burlington, North Carolina, which is where Elon is located, and what they look like maybe compared to what your food forests look like. And I think the picture on the right, there are students who are picking okra. Well, we had a plentiful amount of okra this last year before the pandemic hit, and we were harvesting some there. And then the picture on the left is some of my students who are working with the elementary students, 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders in the garden. And this was probably in August or September of the year before last, before the pandemic. Notice we're not wearing masks. And then there's also kind of like picnic table areas around the schools. So it's not just the garden area, but there's other kind of places where kids can gather to communicate and learn. And then this is an example of an activity we were doing. We were wanting kids to plant seeds, and we wanted to show them how they could make seed strips. So we were cutting newspaper a certain length and using a ruler to measure out how far apart the seeds need to be based on what was written on the seed packets. So it says usually plant these seeds, 2 to 3 inches apart. And so they were using rulers, colored pencils, and glue to put the seeds on there. We're going to let them dry at the end of that session. And we're going to plant them in the garden, cover them with soil the next time out as using a seed strip. Thanks, Jean, 2nd grade teacher, another lead garden teacher. Wow, y'all got amazing leaders here in this group. And here on the left is I'm doing a workshop here. These are teachers at the school where we've helped build the garden. Some of them use the garden a little bit, and some of them haven't used the garden before. And I want you to notice some of the material they were using. And we had just been in the garden doing some work, and then we were coming back out to the picnic tables, and they were responding to some prompts I was giving them, and they were doing some work on their whiteboards and their clipboards. And notice they have ice cube trays, plastic ice cube trays, where they had done some collecting. And then on the right, we're doing something similar. This is a different space. This is at a farm near my campus where I do some teaching. And that's my colleague. We're working with pre-service teachers there in a course on teaching math. And we're trying to show them how math can be taught outside. And I think there's some similarities you could see between the two groups. And then once we do some work inside, sometimes we go into outside spaces. So you all have food forests. I have a literal forest, which is where we do some other work. And I want you to see how people are standing and kind of how they're grouped, because that's really important part of the work that we do when we're outside getting ready to do some of the math. And here's a little preview of why you all have sticks. So sticks becomes a common manipulative that we use when we do math outside, but the teachers also have other things. The participants in this 6-hour workshop have other tools that they're using. And then on the left here, I was up at a conference in Minnesota, and I went to visit a school. And this is a K1 teacher who has an outside space with tree stumps for her students to sit on. And she was facilitating a lesson. They were working on senses and writing about what they were hearing or drawing pictures. And then on the right is the forest classroom where I teach. So I also have a fire pit in mind. The kindergartners and first graders don't have a fire pit in that circle. We have a fire pit, and we also have tree stumps where we sit around, and they're doing some individual work there. And then I want to show you a picture of what happens when the weather's not necessarily cooperative for us at Garden Club. We can do some work inside too. And this is work we were doing around pumpkins. So it was around October. And again, the materials on the table are a regular part of what we do. And we were doing some estimating at first. How many seeds do you think are in the pumpkin? And they were writing that down. And then I think they were calculating some averages of their estimates. And I have pictures, I didn't put them here, of when they cut open the pumpkins and they started pulling the seeds out and they started doing some counting of those seeds. And then here, I also wanted to show you, here's a workshop that my wife, Anna, and I were doing. And we had sticks and pine cones inside that we were working with first to show them how we could do math with natural materials inside the classroom. And then on the right is a different garden at Elon University, where I was having the students do an exploration looking for certain mathematical things when they're out in the garden. This is one of my last pictures. Again, my Elon University students were sitting around picnic tables. I've given them some prompts. They're doing some drawing. There's also some children's books that are there on the table as well. And then on the right is another workshop where we're inside under a barn. But we also have sticks, but paper, pencils, other things we're working with too. Okay. So we just looked through 20 photos of some of the work that I do, and I hope it doesn't make you wish we were in person doing things in real life, because that made me want to do it in real life too. Zoom is not my jam. But if you could, what did you notice in those photos? Anything that resembles what you do? Any good practices that you know work? Anything that was new or different? Did you notice any concepts or themes across? If anyone wanted to unmute and talk at this point, yeah, engagement goes up. Things, you can put your hands on things, engagement goes up. Y'all probably know that. It's really important. Thanks, Diana. Anything else you notice? Yeah, seed strips. Yeah, you could say, do they need to make seed strips? Maybe not, but boy, did they enjoy it. It was a lot of fun to make them. There was a lot of hands-on work, cutting the newspaper, getting the glue, letting them do that measuring. So if you know your math standards, most of you probably have a measuring standard in there. So just making the seed strips itself could be useful for meeting measurement standards. You could even get really deep, like, are we using inches or centimeters, and why? And can we convert from inches to centimeters?
I love the tree stumps because the tree stumps were in different sizes, and you could talk about mass. You could talk about measurement, weight, using the varieties of the tree stumps that were, that were used for seats.
Absolutely. Like, everything becomes a manipulative, even the stumps. Like, we could turn and we could measure diameter, we could measure radius, we could talk about anything to do with circles just in the stumps themselves.
Yeah.
I was going to also mention the seating, just sitting in a circle, gathering in a circle to do things. Obviously now with social distancing, that's still possible. And also, as Alina was saying, the seats themselves, or having a table also I just wanted to remind our teachers that they do have grants available. So if you have not spent your grant funds, that's a great idea. Something you can spend it on is having a table, you know, a picnic table for the food forest. That's really helpful.
Mm, yeah. We have found that having multiple spaces, a big enough space to gather in a circle, Eddie, you're right, circles are so important to the work outside with kids. And I'm going to talk more about that in just a minute. But circles together as a group, and then when they break off into small groups, forming circles and talking. There's a lot of standing up too when we're outside. We don't always have to be sitting down. So a lot of standing up in circles. And yeah, tables become really important, other surfaces to write on and work on. And I see, Nancy, that's a good point there, a good question. Will they measure between plants once the seeds start coming out of the ground? What a great other activity. Let's see, we measured them, we put them 2 to 3 inches in our seed strips. How are they coming up out of the ground? Let's do some measuring here. It sounds like a great idea. Okay, so you definitely got some of the insights, and I just wanted to give you a visual because we're not doing it together, we're on Zoom. I wanted to show some photos of what this work looks like. So let's move on a little bit. And because the focus here is on math, and some of you probably have some tests related to math. Is that true? Do y'all get your students have tests at the end of the year related to math? Yeah, so sometimes when we talk about science, teachers are like, okay, that's like the extra thing. Not that I'm against science, but that's sometimes the perception that I hear. It's often not tested. In North Carolina, it's tested in 5th grade and 8th grade. So many tests, yeah. But when we talk about math, teachers kind of tense up a little bit. Like, you don't know, I got to get them to be able to do these things. So they're a little more wary about doing math outside in gardens. Just want to remind everyone of the effective math practices put out by the National Council for Teachers of Mathematics. So it's important to have a goal. So when we're going out to food forests or gardens, we do need to have a mathematics goal in mind. I did look at all of the 2nd through 5th grade pacing guides and standards that Eddie sent me to make sure the activities we're going to do in just a minute relate to those standards that are coming up. So we definitely believe in having a mathematics goal. It's also important to promote reasoning and problem solving. So to make sure that kids are engaged in the process of doing math, and I'll show you how that works. Using and connecting mathematical representations. This is when using the sticks is really going to help us meet this goal, this effective practice, because we can use materials that we find outside to make mathematical representations of some concepts. And then 4th one, meaningful mathematical discourse. That means when we go outside and kids are kind of standing or sitting, we can put them in groups of 2 or 3 or 4, and they can talk about the math that they're doing to encourage that mathematical discourse. And there's a few more. It's pose purposeful questions. If we were doing these things outside, questions would be the thing that came out of my mouth the most as we're doing the activities. And we get the kids to ask questions too. And by doing this, we're building procedural fluency from the conceptual understanding. So I'm going to show you in just a minute. It's important that we use manipulatives to understand concepts, but then we have a means to go to procedural fluency on like a whiteboard or a clipboard or some other way. And then there are 2 more, supporting productive struggle. Sometimes we give kids tasks they don't really know how to do just yet, but we let them struggle through it, find multiple ways to be successful. And lastly, eliciting and using evidence of student thinking. So when students have sticks or they have whiteboards, they can show each other what they're doing, what their thinking is. And then we can use their thinking as teachers. Tell me more about that, Eddie. How did you come up with that model? Or Elena, that's an interesting way to kind of think about solving that or representing that. Tell us more about it. And then we can then use what students think and say in our instruction. So everything we're getting ready to do, you can justify by saying, well, I'm using the NCTM's effective practices for teaching math. Yeah, Diana, nature gives us free manipulatives. Yeah, that is one of the main points I'm going to try to get across here, is that going outside in gardens, you're usually going to have some form of manipulative to work with. So yeah, all these effective teaching practices for math can be done in a food forest. Okay, so main ideas for today. I'm getting to the activities, I promise. So getting material. So just making sure that everyone has their hands on something is really important. It is no good if 2 kids have the manipulatives and everyone else doesn't. Should be common knowledge. Just want to reiterate that. And it can be sticks, it can be leaves, it can be seeds, it can be acorns, it can be pine cones, it can be clovers, blades of grass, pieces of mulch. And then something else, I hope you saw in the pictures, having a whiteboard or a clipboard with paper is another good tool to be used at the same time. So you can move from one to the other. So structure, I'm going to briefly mention the core routines. It's something I could do a whole session on, but I just want to show you like the process we go through in our workshops that we believe help guide students with a structure, with expectations for going outside. We use this in our garden clubs. And that curriculum, the main idea is that math is everywhere and we can use our garden to find any kind of math we're doing. We do our workshops for K through 8. We can certainly do K through 5 here today. And then I just want to put a plug for assessment. And when you're walking around and hearing students and seeing what they're doing, you're checking for their understanding or their misunderstanding all the time. So it's really good assessment that can happen when you're doing math outside. Okay, I feel like I need to convince the people, and maybe you're not the crowd, but there's often naysayers or skeptics that are like, wait a second, math is too valuable, I can only do it inside. I just try to give you a brief explanation to say, we can do real deep, rich math in outside spaces, particularly gardens. Does that resonate with everyone? How are we doing? Does it make sense? Okay. If you have an administrator that's skeptical about math outside or a colleague, we can work on that. So real quick, here are the core routines that we use that kind of guide our lesson planning when we go outside into gardens. We start with an opening circle. And that could be inside the classroom or right when we get outside. Sometimes we walk in a line to get outside like we normally do, and I circle everyone up. My students learn to circle up their small groups. And we have something that we're doing when we go around. Maybe everyone's introducing themselves for the first time. Maybe there's a quick check-in question of like, your favorite animal or, something you're looking forward to in the future where everyone gets a chance to share something. Sometimes when we do garden clubs, I heard Elena say there were 40 that were supposed to show up. We sometimes have 35 kids. And that could be a really big circle. So we break up into smaller circles to do some check-ins. This is just a way to connect people, build trust, and attend to social emotional well-being. So we got to orient around a circle. And then we explore. And this is important because when kids go outside, they want to move their bodies. And if you're in the middle of the school day and they haven't had a chance to move their bodies a lot, it's not wrong or bad for them to want to move their bodies. But if you go outside and you circle up and then you want them to sit still and listen to a lesson, their bodies are urging them to move. So we need to design a lesson for them to do some exploring. And that can be a scavenger hunt. It can be walking around taking pictures with iPads or smartphones. It can be collecting sticks because you're going to use them for a lesson later. It can be finding 5 things that you think are really interesting, or it's St. Patrick's Day, let's find 5 green things and then come back. Like there's all kinds of ways you can let them walk around, move their bodies. Facilitation is the lesson. Okay, my standard is this. We're working on this measurement. We're working on fractions. We're working on adding 2-digit numbers. Then you have time to facilitate your lesson. And then there's a time to reflect. And that can mean they have a worksheet they need to do sitting outside to show their conceptual understanding on paper, or they're writing about what they learned, or they're using Flipgrid to record a video of something. And then once everyone is finished, we close up in a circle to get reoriented before we go back inside. There's a quick overview of the structure that we use with kids, grades kindergarten through 6th grade that we've worked with. I want to mention that to you as something that could be valuable as you take kids outside. All right, now we're getting to a series of activities. Let me check my time. All right, it's only 4:56, right on time here. So as I explained before, we tend to let kids collect their own stuff. And so for us, sticks are a really easy manipulative that's around all the time. And as I said before some of you got here, I know a 5th grade teacher who was doing this once. She went to one of our workshops and she didn't quite remember. We said, get one larger than your pinky finger, but smaller than your pinky to elbow, because she had a 5th grader that went and found a log, probably bigger than he was, and was dragging it back to the circle. And he wasn't going to be able to use that. So we sometimes give kids those measurements to collect their sticks. And if you have sticks, great. We're going to work with them in just a second. But before we even do that, if we pretend I sent you out, if we were in person, to get some sticks, my question is this: what mathematics are students doing when collecting the sticks? So can y'all put in the chat what students would be doing? If I said, go collect 17 sticks, this is what we're doing for our exploration. Make sure it's longer than your pinky finger, shorter than your pinky to elbow. When they're going to do that for like 2 or 3 minutes, what math are they doing? Definitely counting. Thanks, Margaret. Sorting. Spatial sense, estimating, classifying. Yeah, estimating the size. Yeah, that one on the ground over there looks like it fits within these parameters. Yep, size comparison, comparing. I'll wait another few seconds. Any more? I know Eddie already did some math because he said he thought it was 7 at first. So he was doing something else with his sticks to get to 17. What was Eddie doing?
Dividing.
Yeah. Cheating. Eddie was cheating. Yeah, there's like dividing. If I have 1 and I break it 1 time, I divide it in half, I then have 2.
It's such a great visual for division. Like as soon as you said math and like I like how we think science in the garden. I'm sorry I didn't put it in the chat. I couldn't articulate it this way, but
Yeah.
it just changes the way I think about everything now. Being in the garden with math, how I think I can do anything. The science lesson, I can do anything, any lesson. We're doing conversion, like you do any measurement, and then you just do whatever you're doing. So thank you in advance.
And I think we're done here. Like that's it. That's exactly right. Thank you for articulating that. Yeah, and the visual here for a lot of kids is like I have 1 hole, I break it in half, I have 2. Of 1 hole, I have 2. Now let's break this again. Now we can go even further. So like if you're thinking, okay, that's maybe kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 4th and 5th grade, we can start breaking into more pieces. And then if I had 4 pieces or 6 pieces, we could, or if we had 8 pieces and we wanted to start with mixed fractions, I wanted to get to, something else, we could certainly do that.
It's not just dividing, like with just, how hard it is to teach a kid a fraction where it's the whole thing, like show a fourths. You take a stick, this is fourths, and then you take another stick with a different, whatever, denomination or measurement and cut that into fourths. Which one's bigger? That's like the hardest concept. And you just solve that. So yeah, we're done. Okay. Thanks a lot. Where's the form? Where's the Google?
Yeah, we're gonna go through a few activities, but you're exactly right. Like you're gonna see once you get a vision for the math you can do with the manipulatives that you find in a garden. And today I'm not even doing stuff like related to the garden, the plants and everything else. We're just the stuff that we find lying around. We're trying to keep it simple today. So I have a few things. Equal parts. Yeah, thanks, Elena. So there's definitely counting. I got to get up to 17. There's estimating. You all had that one. There's adding. I have 2, but here's 2 more over here. So 2 plus 2 is 4. Let me recount again. I got to see how many I have. I lost track. Oh, I have 18. Let me take away 1. Now I have 17. I'm grouping. I got 5 in my hand here, or 10 in my hand here. I need to find 7 more. Some of y'all said grouping. There's definitely students like Eddie who are like, I don't want to walk around anymore. I'm just going to break some of these in half. I'm going to divide mine and to get to 17. So, and that's just to get started. That's just with collecting the sticks. That's with any manipulatives that you're going to get. Just the collecting, you do some math too. Okay. So I want to hear from you all. I know I'm using sticks because it's easy for me. It's what I have access to. I use them a lot. Do you all have other things that students could collect where you work? When you're outside, can you give me some ideas in the chat? Or if you want to unmute and talk about them.
Beer bottles? No, I'm just kidding.
Litter. All right, kids, we're going to clean up the litter around here and use it to do math. Okay, leaves. Thank you, Kenora. Seed pods. That'd be good. Yeah, rocks. Thanks, Nancy. I went down in 2018. I did a service week with some Elon students in Jamaica. And when I got there, the woman in charge of the school said that I was teaching 5th grade for the week, and I did. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna use some nature. And all we had access to right around the school were rocks, were little pebbles. And we use them every day. And in fact, my first thought was, oh my God, I usually use sticks, leaves, acorns, things like that. We're using small pebbles. It actually worked wonderfully. And we did a lot of great geometry with pebbles, with the rocks around the school. The kids only threw them a couple times. Just had to work on that a little bit. All right. Good. Like, again, any manipulative that you can find will work. Okay. So here's what we're going to go through. We're going to roll through like 3 or 4 different activities, and then come back together for some Q&A to process everything together. So one thing we do after we collect is start doing some sequences and patterns. So if you have sticks in front of you, which you should, can you make a sequence or a pattern? And I'm going to leave it purposely open-ended. Wish I had a document camera right about now. So how could you make a sequence or a pattern in front of you with your sticks? So I could go with this, a stick like this, a stick like this, a stick like this. Would anyone know what comes next? And do any of you work on sequences or patterns with your students? Is that a math standard for you?
Yes, it's in probably every grade level, but we just did it in 4th grade. You can add a rock and do like 2 sticks and a rock and 2 sticks and a rock, or turn the stick at a 45-degree angle. Or I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself.
No. This is it. This is where Zoom is not helping me. This is so interactive when we do it in person.
Yeah, I know.
Everyone's like around looking at what each other's doing. But you're right. We could bring another manipulative. I'm going to put in big stick, small stick, rock.
Right.
Big stick, small stick, rock. And then it says here on the slide, you can repeat with complexity. So if you have 4th graders, 5th graders, 6th graders, I do this with college students, and I keep saying, okay, let's do another one, because they normally start with like an A, B pattern.
Right.
Maybe some of them do A, B, C, A, B, C. I then say, okay, I want you to add some more complexity to your sequence, to your pattern. What can you do next? That's all I ask them to do. And I'm like, And then they start doing those things. They're like, I'm going to do big one, perpendicular, and then smaller one horizontal. Another, and they might still do A, B, but they're doing something a little bit differently to make it more complex. Any other thoughts on sequences and patterns? So oftentimes I'll say, don't tell anyone next to you what your sequence or pattern is, because they sometimes like to talk about what they're doing. And then you go to your turn and talk partner, it's maybe a group of 2 or 3, and see if you can guess what each other's patterns are and what might come next. So you get them to like, oh, I'm going to do this so so-and-so can see what mine is going to be. And then they can extend on each other's work and talk about, again, this mathematics discourse. They can talk about the patterns that they're making and why. And you can add increased complexity. All right. Yeah, thanks, Diana. Vertical, horizontal, just now saw that. All right, now let's do some shapes. So can you take some sticks and can you make a triangle? Can you make a rectangle? Can you make a square? Can you make a trapezoid? Yeah, I threw that in for the 5th grade. 5th grade standards had a lot about polygons in them. Yeah. Elena, I see that circle. Good. So when I was in Jamaica teaching, one of the standards we were working on that week was different geometric shapes. And so we continually made different geometric shapes with the rocks that we had. And when students are making shapes, and you can break this down, you don't have to give them everything at the same time. Make these 5 things like I just asked you. Let's make a triangle. Now, what kind of triangle is that? What are the angles on the interior of those triangles if you're in upper grades? Or just when you're in lower grades, can they make their own shapes? And then I saw some of the standards in the like second, third, fourth grade are related to understanding the similarities and differences between rectangles and squares. And so if you see what kids are making with the sticks or other materials, you'll be able to understand what they know about a rectangle or a square or a trapezoid or a triangle. All right, making the shapes, identifying shapes is one thing we can do.
Okay.
Do y'all get a sense of what you could do once they make the shapes? Like how could you extend once they have some shapes in front of them?
Make congruent shapes.
Okay, excellent. What else?
Classify quadrilaterals.
Okay,
Make
Identify
another
angles.
pattern. Sorry, Hal.
No, go ahead. I'm just.
Make another
Skip that.
pattern using increasing the number of sides of each shape.
ooh, I like
3.
that. Yeah, I like that complexity. What else?
What about reflection?
Oh, yeah.
Can you elaborate on that, Eddie?
Just showing what a shape would be like reflected.
Yeah,
Transform, slide, or whatever they call it, twist, rotation.
Right, rotating.
you can also talk about symmetry. And
The symmetry, you can put a
Is there-
stick down the middle, right? Oh,
Yep.
sorry.
You put a stick. Can you put a stick down the middle? Is it same on both sides? Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
You have limitless or manipulatives that you don't have to share. You know, now we don't want to. We worry about not having enough and sharing. And
Yep.
You
a
could
big
also
thing too.
talk about closed shapes and open shapes for the lower grade levels.
Yeah. Can you elaborate on that?
So shapes that have an entrance will be an open shapes, and shapes that are closed altogether, those are, closed shapes. So they have angles, they have sides, they connect.
Polygons.
They're straight lines or rays or points, or you can go into all of that.
Yep. And then
Yes, Scott, polygons.
yeah.
That means that's loosely meaning many gons. Sorry, they're not all good with them.
And then there's also like I saw some of your standards have to do with perimeter and area. So now that we have a shape, how could we figure out perimeter and area of the shapes that we've created? Yeah. No pointy sticks, Elena. Okay, so let's go to angles now. So can you use your sticks or whatever manipulators you have in front of you to make 3 types of angles? And sometimes I just ask like that. I just say the 3 types to see if they remember what are 3 types of angles. And can you make them? So
Yep.
yeah. And then, if you're making, I've added here, you can order them from smallest angle to largest. So you can see if they have an understanding of acute and right and obtuse. And could you bring out protractors to do this? Absolutely. Right? You could use a protractor with some of these things. So we can talk about angles. Some of you teach about angles, correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
this is blowing my mind. Something so simple. This is awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
This is something they can also just draw in the, sand or on the ground. They even all.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for that, Eddie. I had a student who I forget the reason why, but collecting sticks wasn't like she wasn't able to do that at the moment. And so I went over there and I kind of cleared some space on the ground and I gave her one of my sticks and I said, you can draw what it is that what everyone else is doing too. So you can certainly adapt as needed. I one time did an activity where I had them use like 7 or 8 sticks and I had them like put them in a design, like overlapping design on the ground. And then they had to find closed shapes, open shapes. They had to find right angles. They had to find acute angles or obtuse angles on what was in front of them, and then talk to a partner about what they were seeing on the ground as well. I don't know if you can see that. that was a really fun activity because they liked like dropping their sticks down and seeing if they could identify those in the angles on the design of their sticks. Okay. All right. So then for those of you with upper grades, like pick a favorite stick. And then you tell your students, this stick is one whole. So then how would you describe, or how would you understand the other sticks in relation to this one whole? So if this is one whole, what is this one? And this one becomes challenging because it's a non-standard measurement. I have these two things on it. Might need to make that a little simpler. So if this is one whole, what is this? So we're getting back to fractions. If this is one whole, what is this? And how do I know? And so we can ask them to use measurement language. And we often do this without giving them any measuring tools. But then, like I said, with the protractor, we could bring rulers out. I have rulers, yardsticks. We have soft measuring tape that we also take outside too. And then we can actually use some of the numbers from the measuring tools. But oftentimes we let them just talk about it. Anyways, we have a lot of students who will say, I always heard like this was about an inch on my thumb. So I start counting how many inches are down here, and they're starting to use whatever they have on them. Or they're like, if this is 1, then I'm going to see how many times this goes into this. It goes 2 and then a little bit more. So what is that little bit more? We can get talking about fractions in that way. Fractions is a topic that we do a lot of work with, my colleague and I. There's a lot of fraction work you can do with manipulatives outside in the garden or in a forest. Okay, and then my last one for the activity. So it's like you can create math stories. Yeah, thank you, Dan. Absolutely. It's one of the big things we focus on is that language acquisition in math and using it regularly. So here's a story that actually one of my students did with 3rd graders at her school when she was doing a practicum experience. The tree outside our classroom dropped 4 branches with 3 leaves on each branch. How many leaves in all? And she had at each group the branches and the leaves that you see in the picture there to let the students work with them. And I actually did this inside first. She wasn't ready yet to take her students outside. They didn't have a garden. They didn't have an area to go outside. But she brought natural materials inside her classroom. That was the math story that she gave them. And they were trying to solve it. This was introducing the concept of multiplication to them. So I also want to point out that a really cool tool as the teacher, if you have a phone that you can take pictures with, you can take pictures of student work, and then you can bring what students create outside and put them on slides when you're back in the classroom. Hey, look at what Debbie made the other day when we were outside. We're going to use this, these shapes that she created, or we're going to use these angles that she created. We're going to do some work with them. Or remember when we did this math story the other day? And so we're going to take a few of these pictures of different representations of how you solve for this problem. Let's talk about the similarities and differences between these two. So the pictures of the work that students do become a really valuable tool. And yes, Debbie, beware leaves of 3, especially around where I teach. We got to look out for poison ivy all the time. All right. I'm going to stop there. Thoughts, comments, questions before I'm going to wind up with just a few more slides. I think we're kind of right on time here with the last 14 minutes. Yeah, Eddie, absolutely. Like you can be doing science and then kind of do a side foray into some math and then come back to the science. They certainly can be integrated out. Any thoughts, comments, questions before I wrap it up?
I love this, especially with my garden club situation that I have some students that are virtual and some students that are face-to-face. This is perfect for them to have that engagement and interaction with each other. That's just like what you're saying. The kids that are face-to-face I could put their information on a slideshow. That way the students that are at home can actually have a physical, tangible experience what's going on in the food forest. I really love that. And yes, I'm Jamaican.
Awesome.
So
Anyone
yeah,
else?
wanted to say about how easily this can just spill over into any subject. Once you get that math language going, emphasizing what Diana was saying. That's so important to start developing that language. And so even if students are doing descriptive writing, they can include, these lessons can spill over into them describing something. If they're making observations in science, they can use it to compare things. And so it really can just be used for anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Inception, that was a good movie. Yeah, and we do hours and hours of this, and I'm just giving you a taste, and I'm glad that you're catching the vision for how everything becomes manipulative, because there's so many things we could do with your food forest or your garden. Like, let's count the number of blank in this area. Let's compare how, the circumference of this to the circumference of that. If we look in this area where we have blueberry bushes, we have some at our garden here, and each blueberry bush produces over 50 berries. About how many berries are we going to have? It's like you just start using what's around you to generate the math that you need to be teaching your students based on the standards and the pacing guides. Okay, let me try to wrap this up. So what we think that is important is sometimes when you're in the math classroom, like speed and accuracy and following algorithms are prized. I know that's what I was recognized for when I was in math class in elementary school, but this allows for more creativity, multiple pathways for understanding concepts. It allows for differentiation to occur because it's so open-ended and kids can go in different directions, especially as we get into more story problems that have multiple pathways. Want to recommend when you have students kind of set up around you, whatever your space allows, walk around and ask them some questions about what they're doing. Ask them to explain their thinking. That's one of those math practices that's really effective. So you get to circulate and check in with all your students, and sometimes being outside, the space allows for that. And when you're circulating, you can check for student understanding or misunderstanding and follow up with them as needed. And again, taking pictures of their work is really helpful. So you can document their learning. You can share with parents later, look at what your child, created during math class today. This was really brilliant. And then they may have this explanation. Or if there's a misconceptions, you can bring them back in and say, hey, yesterday there a couple people thought this, but I'm not so sure. Let's talk about that. So you can work with misunderstanding as well. Again, asking students to explain their thinking. If we were doing this together, I'd ask you to turn and talk to the person next to you to explain, what was that sequencer pattern? Why did you choose to do it that way? How did you make it more complex? Turn and talk, elaborate, practice speaking. And then we didn't even really get to do a lot of that today. We don't have time, but like this is a regular tool that we use when we're teaching outside. A little cloth, marker, whiteboard. We also use clipboards with paper and pencil and pens, colored pencils, etc. And so now that we've done some work here with sticks, now let's go to some of the maybe more traditional things, or let's write out this on your whiteboard, or show this, or if they have clipboards, you can hand out a worksheet that has some, angles on it that you want them to identify as acute or right or obtuse, and they could do that work on the clipboard when they're outside too. So you can move from the manipulatives to other resources as well. And then I think a good practice, especially if anyone's gonna question you doing math in a garden or outside, have a good exit ticket at the end that really hones in on, do they know how to solve the problem? Do they know how to identify the angle? Do they know how to, make a pattern? Let me give them a good exit ticket that's gonna show me whether or not they've captured the main point of my lesson for that day. And that data is really good to support your own practice and learning where students are, but also if anyone else is questioning what students learn when they're outside in a food forest doing math. All right. Well, apparently my animation did something else. Okay. So for you to review and to think about what materials do you already have that you can use outside. My wife teaches in an urban school. but there's still sometimes sticks, rocks, acorns, leaves that she can find from trees around her school. Do you need to get anything based on what we've talked about? The pictures that you saw, there's some other things. Ice cube trays, and those things are great. They're $1 at the store, and you get a class set of those, and kids can collect some things. Ice cube trays are really good. You know, do you remember the core routines? I wish we were in person. If we are one day, we'll go through them together, and then we can talk about why they're valuable when you go outside with kids. Oftentimes teachers are afraid to go outside with kids because they're afraid they'll run around everywhere, that they'll be disorganized. Yeah, egg cartons too, excellent. Yeah, and are you convinced that math standards can be met outside?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All right, very good. And then be thinking about, you know, what does assessment look like? Because I think that's a really important piece. I mean, activities are fun and it's great to get kids working with their hands, but we really want to make sure they're learning the math concepts that we want them to learn. That's one of the most important pieces. If they're not learning the math, it's just fun. I mean, I'm all about fun, but we need to make sure that we're attending to the math goals that we have when we're outside. And then lastly, if some of you use technology and are good with digital tools, like, do you have a class Instagram? Do you use Flipgrid with your students? How can you use those digital tools for students to share their learning when they're outside? I mean, that's just another level to integrating technology into this work too. All right, 2 slides left. This one of my thank you slide. Any questions for me that I can help with?
Awesome. Yes, Scott, I just wanted to jump in for a moment and thank you for doing a quick question and answer session at the end. If you could just give us a quick example or rundown. At the beginning of the presentation, you had a slide with the 5 circles, you know, the opening, explore,
Yep.
facilitate. Can you just give us a quick example of how you would do an activity similar to this using that structure?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So well, we would start, like if we're inside the classroom, I would say, all right, we're getting ready to go outside. Let's go over our protocols. What do we need to be mindful of as far as safety? There's a whole like 20 minutes we could do on making sure we have the right norms and expectations with our students. So we'd line up, we'd go outside, and I would say circle up. And there are some tricks you can use when you circle up. We use magnet feet or we use sticky elbows. This was prior to the pandemic. There's a way to help organize to get kids to circle up. And then we have like a greeting or we do where everyone gets to go around and share something. Again, something simple, favorite color, something good that's happened to you lately, favorite movie that you've seen. Everyone go around and say something. It just kind of is fun and orienting. And then when everyone's done, you get to say, okay, we're getting ready to do this. I'd like to blank. And that's the exploration part. Let's let kids move their body. So I might have them go collect sticks. Like for today, let's go collect sticks. It's a way to explore the space, move their bodies, and do some math because there's math involved in collecting sticks. And they'd all bring their sticks back, and then I'd get them oriented whatever our space allowed, if there's picnic tables or if there's a circle of stumps. And then I would facilitate a lesson around one of the activities that I just did with you. Maybe we're doing sequencing of patterns, or maybe we're doing angles. And I would take them through a series. And my lesson planning would be, what are the series of tasks I'm going to have them do, or questions that I'm going to ask? What are they going to build? And then how are we going to transfer that hands-on work to then a whiteboard, a clipboard, something else? And then I'm going to give them something to like then show me their learning, their conceptual understanding of something. So that's like on paper form, or it might be digital, for them to reflect on what they've learned. And then before we go back inside, I'm going to circle everyone up again, and we're going to check in with everybody, make sure we're good. What'd you learn today? Something exciting that happened. And then we're going to, all right, everyone, we're going to file back in to the class like we normally do. And so those 5 things: the opening circle gets us oriented. Exploration lets them go out and move their bodies. Facilitation is when the teacher, like, here's the lesson that I'm going to do, 15, 20 minutes. Then we're going to reflect, and reflect just means let them process a little bit. And often sometimes in ways that we can collect some data from them. And then we're going to close up in a circle again and get oriented, remind everyone what's next. Like, hey, we got lunch next, or once we get back to the class, you're going to need to get your things to move on to 5th period. Let's make sure everyone's clear before we get back. And then we go back in.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep.
Hi, I have a suggestion for other teachers. I have a class, or I had a class last year where the parents were kind of skittish about signing the media release forms. for social media. So what I
Mhm.
did is I created a private Instagram only
Yeah.
for our class and my parents, and I let them know it would be only private for us. So I was able to share all the cool things we were doing. So
Yeah.
if anyone has any parents that are, reticent about signing that form, maybe if you do a private, just for the parents, private website, that might help you share the good things you're doing to my colleagues.
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of Instagram. And in fact, I will put my wife's handle for her class Instagram account. It is not private, it is public, and she does get permission from everyone to post. And if someone doesn't get permission, she excludes them from some of the pictures, at least of their faces, something to identify them. And a colleague and I did some research on how teachers are using Instagram. If you're interested in that, there's a formal research paper on the ways that teachers are using Instagram these days. So I'm a big fan. Yeah.
Yeah, if
Good for a steady.
go ahead and type in their Instagram in the chat. Go ahead and do it. So we have a couple more minutes. If there's any more questions, just go ahead and throw them out there because we're going to be wrapping up in a couple of minutes. Give people a few seconds to jump in.
Do you have any websites to share of other ideas that relates to what you just did with us for math, Scott?
Yeah, let me I'm gonna put this in the chat. So Juliet Robertson wrote a book called Messy Maths. She's in Scotland. And her book is all about math outside in the early years. She's a wonderful person. I've gotten to know her a little bit. And I'd recommend that. Her first book was more interdisciplinary, and it was called Dirty Teaching. Which has a lot of other good ideas of how to use nature in your teaching.
Awesome.
Okay.
So if
Thank you.
everybody can just get off of mute for a second, let's do a big round of applause because this was awesome, an awesome presentation. Thank you.
Doesn't
Scott.
work.
I feel the same way. I wish I would have known stuff 10 years ago. So
Right.
never too late, never too late. And hopefully we'll be seeing a lot more of you, and you can make your way over to Miami sometime, and we'll do all this in person. It'll be a lot more interactive.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to come do some stuff with you all. And again, to dig in the actual food forests and in your specific spaces and kind of just imagine all the work that you can do in your space. I find it fascinating. I do have a link. I can put it in the chat in a second. 3-question exit ticket just to give me some feedback on whether it was worth your time and if you learned something valuable. And questions that you're still thinking about after this. I think questions are really good. Like, what will you be thinking about after this session? So I certainly hope we can see each other in person in the future.
Great. So yeah, if everybody can just go ahead and copy and paste that link. We're going to be jumping off right now in a few seconds. So just go ahead, copy and paste, and you can put that on your browser, click on it, and open it in a different window. But thank you again, Scott.
Yep.
And everybody, it's great seeing you guys. We'll be seeing each other in person sometime soon.
Thank you, Scott. This was
Thank you
amazing.
all.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. You have a great day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Debbie.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Looks like Lisa was trying to jump in at this time.
Yeah, I'll text her.
You want to just text her? All right. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Deb.
This was was awesome,
Right.
Scott. I
that
think
all
the
right?
teachers really loved it.
Yeah, thank you so
Okay.
much. I mean, I really wish I would have known